I want to look at, first of all, the gift of spiritual discernment, or the discerning of spirits, found in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 10. To another is given discerning of spirits. Discerning means to divide, to be able to make a spiritual judgment. So this gift, if I could define it very briefly, is a perception in judging spiritual things. A perception in judging spiritual things. This gift would be characteristic of a counselor, right? Whether I hate to use this word, a professional counselor. We've said we'd want to sort of reject the model of professionalism, but whether a staff counselor, a paid counselor, professional counselor, or a lay counselor. Those who have perception in judging spiritual things. Now, before we look into this, and one example of this from the Old Testament, I want to point out how important this gift is. The gift of spiritual discernment is so important in the church because not all of us have good discernment. Is that true? Now, we need to admit that. Can't really go on until we admit that. Because else, why would it be a gift? And if everybody in this congregation had great spiritual discernment, then the Spirit wouldn't have given this gift to some. Right? And that's the point of 1 Corinthians 12. We each lack on an individual basis, so we need the body. And this is an extremely important point. One of the applications of which is that all of us, some of us more than others, but all of us need to learn to submit to spiritual judgments, to spiritual discernment, to be willing to admit, all right, I'm not that gifted in this area, or in this area I just don't see it. So I need the spiritual discernment of others. All right? It's very important. Those who have this gift need to be willing to risk offending people. We live in a society where the rule is laissez-faire. All right, just let everyone figure it out for themselves, and if they hurt themselves and if it brings disaster on their house, well, at least we didn't offend them. Right? That's not the model in church. Those with the gift of spiritual discernment, and I would again remind you, all of us need to have something of that gift. Need to risk offending people by coming alongside others and saying, I discern that this plan is not good. I discern that this plan is not good. Talk about creating a potential firestorm or agitating the beehive. All we need to be willing to, if this gift means anything, then we need to be willing to use it. We need to be willing to receive it, to accept spiritual judgment. Well, let's look at one example before we close. We'll just look at this one ordinary gift today. But please turn with me to Exodus chapter 18. Exodus chapter 18, which contains an example of Jethro, who is an excellent example of a person who was gifted with spiritual discernment. I want to point out just three things with regard to how Jethro demonstrated spiritual discernment. Exodus chapter 18, beginning at verse 14. I'll state the attribute and then we'll read a bit from this chapter. The first thing that Jethro did in demonstrating this gift of spiritual discernment is that he asked questions. He asked questions. And I want to point out to you two very important questions that he asked. Very important questions. He asked a what question, and he asked a why question. A what question and a why question. The first is just an information gathering question. What's happening here? And the second is, why is it happening? All right, so let's look at that. Exodus chapter 18, beginning at verse 14. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, let me just back up for a moment. Notice, first of all, nobody asked him for his opinion here. He just was observant. But just like you in the congregation will sometimes just observe. something in the congregation. And what tends to happen is we just tend to keep it to ourselves. I observe that this person is about to create havoc in their life. I see that what he's doing is a disaster. But, who am I to get involved? Well, Jethro saw, and he got involved. He saw all that Moses did for the people, and he asked. Now, here's the what question. What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Wow, what a great question. He's showing that he's there to learn. He's saying, I don't pretend to be omniscient God. I don't know all that's happening in your life. Just tell me, please, what is it that you're doing for the people? What's going on? Just consider the implications of that, even for parenting. We're so quick to ask the why question. We walk in on a scene, wherever it might be, there's food all over the floor, and why did you do this? Why'd you spill food all over? Well, let's first ask what? What happened? Maybe a cat jumped up on the table and knocked the food all over the place. Right? The what precedes the why. So he asks, what happened here? Secondly, he says, why do you sit alone and all the people stand before you from morning until evening? Right? So he says, why are you doing this? And then listen, he actually allowed Moses to respond. And Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of God, when they have a difficulty, they come to me and I judge between one and the other. See, that's spiritual discernment. Judging. Don't judge. No, judge. Use discernment. I judge between one and the other. I make known the statutes of God and His laws. He asks questions. Listen to what Proverbs 20 verse 5 says. Proverbs 20 verse 5 says, counsel in the heart of a man is like deep waters, but a man of understanding will draw it out. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that true that you and I carry counsel deep in our hearts that we're not comfortable sharing, that we would prefer to keep to ourselves? But a man of understanding draws it out. How? By asking questions, by priming the pump of the deep waters of our heart with questions. We need to learn to be good question askers. What and why? And then listeners. He allowed Moses to explain the situation. Secondly, Jethro offered his spiritual judgment in clear terms. He offered his spiritual judgment in clear terms. What does he say? Verse 17. So Moses' father, after asking and hearing, said to him, the thing that you do is not good. The thing that you do is not good. Wow. Friends, the church needs that kind of courage to be clear in spiritual judgments. The direction of your life right now is not good. It's not good. We tend to shy away from being that direct. Well, I just wonder if maybe it's not possible, if you couldn't consider doing something. Maybe lovingly direct sometimes. All right. You need to be careful. You need to be careful that we don't jump to conclusions without asking questions. We need to be careful in the way that we phrase these things. But the church needs this clarity of spiritual judgment. Thirdly, to Jethro's credit and to our example, he proposed an alternate plan. He proposed an alternate plan. The thing that you're doing is not good. And then he goes on. I won't read all of his words there. But you see, we tend to be critical rather than constructive. We tend to tear down. We look around and see all these problems. We provide commentary on all the deficits in the church. We don't build up. We don't suggest alternate plans. We don't volunteer our services in those alternate plans. Jethro suggested an alternate plan, a constructive plan, which, as you may know, Moses adopted. He said, that is a better idea. That's great. The Spirit must have really been working you to give that idea. The gift of spiritual judgment is critical in our congregation.